Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Benchwarmers Podcast. Unfortunately, this week my co-host Josh Seitz cannot be joining us. He's unwell, so best of luck, Josh. Hope you're feeling better soon. However, I'm delighted to be joined by the Bradford City Women's manager, Chris HAMES. Chris, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's our pleasure. I was first of all, I just want to say congratulations on being in charge of Bradford for 1 year. How have you found your first year?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably been easier first years for people to have, with less pandemics involved, and unfortunately, we've not nearly played as much football as we'd like to. But yeah, it's been a really good year. I liked it.
Yeah, well, of course, you previously worked with the likes of, I think it was Sheffield FC. Am I right in thinking that?
Sheffield FC, yeah.
Yeah. How did you actually come across to joining Bradford then from Sheffield, another women's side who I believe they're in a lower league than Bradford? I could be wrong about that.
No, league above. So I've been at Sheffield for 3 years. Done pretty much every role at the club during that time. I was lucky enough to join them as development manager when they were in the old WSL2, obviously now the Championship. The final year that they had in the WSL, I stepped up and was doing stuff with the first team as first team coach. And then unfortunately, the club made the decision to withdraw. Withdraw from the Championship and drop down, and that then gave me opportunity to sort of become assistant manager, and just the troubles, as you can imagine, sort of dropping down and having to build a squad last minute. Couple of then roles as sort of caretaker manager, and then sort of by the time I think it was the third manager in just over the year had left, or in a year had left. Opportunity didn't quite come my way, and I just sort of felt I was ready for my next challenge. So sort of exact same time, perfect timing, Bradford came up, and I thought I'd go for that one.
Am I right in thinking you've also had previous spells with Manchester United, Crewe Alexander Ladies, and Macclesfield Town?
That's correct, yeah.
So in terms of women's football, because I understand it's slightly different to men's football, how would you go about actually getting the opportunities such as working with Crewe and Sheffield? Do you have to go through the same sort of like job interview process?
Yeah, I've probably more so than I have done at any of my other clubs. I mean, I've worked at non-league men's clubs as well, and the clubs I've been at in the women's game have definitely been sort of far more well run, and with systems in place, with certain standards in place, really, and that perhaps haven't or aren't always there in the men's game. I think sometimes it's jobs for the lads there, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but myself, without a distinguished playing background at all, it was sort of opportunities then to get my foot in the door at the highest level I could, at the best level I could, at the best clubs I could, without anyone sort of no preconceived ideas and no prejudgment, really.
What non-league clubs at men's level were you working with, if you don't mind asking?
So in the past, I've worked West Didsbury and Chorlton, club in Manchester. Sale United, done little bits with other clubs based around there, a team called Manchester Central, who've unfortunately now folded. So, a few bits around the Manchester area originally.
What were you doing at these clubs? Were you like a coach them as well, or were you manager there?
Coach, assistant manager. This is my first management role at Bradford.
Okay.
Yeah, whether it be reserve team coach, reserve team manager, assistant manager, I've done it all, really.
So leading on from that then, how are you actually finding the step up into management from coaching?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I made that step through choice, not through sort of necessity, really. It's not like I was thrown in. I'd spent much of the last few years getting myself ready for this. Did I expect it to come probably this soon? Probably not. But working with some brilliant managers, and I've learned a lot of them, but likewise I've also worked with some managers where I have questioned what they've done. Obviously gone about it professionally as a coach and an assistant and carried on working, but you've learned from their mistakes as well as your own and sort of formulated an idea. I mean, I've got book after book of my notes that I've made over the last few years and sort of used that to pull together my own ideas. So yeah, to then make the step was, I mean, there's things you can never prepare for, but for the most part, it's gone as I'd sort of want it to, really.
And I'm sure if Josh was here, he definitely would have brought this up, because every time we talk to a manager, he brings it up. But do you actually have any coaching badges? Because, well, Josh is learning about them, and I think he's got one so far. I'm not too sure. I believe he's pushing for his second one. I don't really know how it works, to be honest with you. But have you got any coaching badges?
Yeah, I'm UEFA B. so sort of third level up of the
okay,
yeah. Intention has been now for a number of years to do my A license, but unfortunately just cost and time, particularly when you're working full time, it becomes difficult to get on them. But definitely working up towards them as high as
especially this year with the coronavirus as well, it's been difficult. I'm sure. How did you find the process getting your coach badges? Do you think at times it can be a bit difficult?
No, I think so. I did my first one before I'd ever even coached a club. I'd sort of dropped out of the game, really. I was one of the statistics of young lads who gets to sort of 17, 18 and stops playing. Dream had always been to be a coach, and then that sort of starts to fade away because you don't really believe it's true. And then as I left university, I just decided to jump in at the deep end, throw myself on a course, did my level 1, and then found a club and sort of got lucky that I started working full time within only full time in a football club at Macclesfield Town within only a couple of months of having that level 1. So I was then on the path, and that was going to be it. And everything I've done in football has been gearing me up to go as far as I can on them courses, really.
And obviously, like you said, then you mentioned that you went to university. Which university did you go to?
Sheffield Hallam.
Okay. Is that how you got involved with Sheffield FC?
No, strangely enough, no. It's just been coincidence that sort of Sheffield is a place that I keep coming back to. No, I mean, my university time at university was sort of 3 years where, unfortunately, football wasn't involved at all, other than as a fan. But yeah, it's just been from Manchester, but just sort of kept on coming back this way. Live the Sheffield area now, and yeah, it just keeps dragging me back, really.
Am I right in thinking you got a psychology degree there?
I do. I went back and did a psychology master's a couple of years later, but yeah.
Did you find a way to manage to take your psychology degree into football in a way of looking at the game?
Yeah, I think stuff that I was probably already doing or I'd seen people already do, but you're now just conscious of it. So whilst I'm not necessarily using day-to-day certain skills, direct skills, it's more just being very aware of how I'm using language and how I'm using environment and just different, I suppose, these skills you can use within design and everything. So it was something that was probably already there, but now, I'm very aware of why I'm using it now. So.
And of course I'll slightly move back onto football then. Might come back to your personal life a bit later, of course, but I'm right in thinking that you were one of 15 applicants which applied for the Bradford City Women's manager job.
Possibly, yeah. I didn't really know. I knew there was a few people that had gone from it from sort of range of backgrounds, but yeah.
Was there anyone in your life who sort of inspired you to move towards becoming a manager and apply for this job? I don't know how to word this, but was anyone there to give you the confidence that you could go for this job? Yeah,
like I said, I'd spent quite a bit of time the last few years working with some brilliant managers. Like I said, when we were in the WSL2, the first team manager there, Zoe Johnson, she was fantastic and did such a brilliant job in managing the players and quite a difficult group of sort of young players ready to step into a good level. A really good friend of mine, Kyle O'Reilly, who I ended up being assistant manager to when we dropped down a league. Me and him couldn't talk football with each other until sort of the sun sets and everything.
Yeah.
So there was always that side. But I think probably the person that's backed me up and supported me most was actually the general manager at Sheffield, Helen Mitchell. I mean, she's fantastic woman who led that club herself to the very top. But quite a very, very strong opinion in a positive way, and lets me know when I've made a mistake, which is great, and tells me how to support that. And then when I got to the point when the Bradford job came up, I spoke to her about it, and she, as much as she probably didn't want to lose me from the club, she understood it. And even now, we keep in touch and bounce a lot of ideas off her. So, inspiration from a lot of people, but I think the person who probably drove me to that point was Helen.
So when you were working under her leadership then, what skills in management did you pick up from her?
The way that she communicates with people, I think, is the best bit. I mean, you're talking about someone who set the club up herself. I think I'm right in saying it's 2004. I mean, I've not been there that long, but she set it up there and took the club from the very bottom to the second tier of women's football.
Oh well.
She was Sheffield FC were the first club to get themselves promoted through actual performance on the pitch into the second tier, not through licensing. So she did an unbelievable job with them. And anyone you speak to that is one of her former players, the first thing they say is that you'd have run through a brick wall for her. And whilst I'm probably not there and probably don't have that, just seeing the way that she speaks to people and everyone wants to sort of do their best for her was something I learned a lot. And then just again the way that she handles probably the environment. So a couple of times that the manager had gone and I was me and her were sort of in caretaker charge. She was sort of overseeing what I was doing, but just the way that she spoke to players and knew the exact right moment of when to give them encouragement, when to give them a bit of a kick, and just managing all that really, I think was the biggest lesson.
And of course, when you were going for that Bradford job, am I right in thinking that you had to do like a sort of a trial training session with the players to see how it worked?
Yeah. So I mean, the players were very strong behind what they wanted, I think, or they very much had a say. If someone wasn't capable, I think they'd have let the committee know. But there was sort of two sides to it. So yeah, absolutely.
How nervous were you before that? 'Cause, I mean, that training session could possibly have decided if you ended up in that role.
Yeah, I love those environments personally. I probably get more nervous now that I know everyone, now that I've set a standard, and I've delivered some really good sessions. I probably get a little bit more nervous going into every session now, wanting to reach them standards than the first one. I don't probably view it as this is make or break. I just view it as this is the next opportunity to learn. So I actually quite enjoyed that first one quite a lot really.
And I was just generally wondering about this in terms of like your coaching style, because I know with, for example, the Bradford City men's team, they have Stuart McCall and Kenny Black, who is assistant manager, and he's like following them around from Rangers to Scunthorpe. I believe Charlotte Stewart is your assistant manager. Has she sort of been with you throughout your journey, or have you only met her at Bradford?
I only met her at Bradford. I mean, Charlotte's been at Bradford for, I want to say 19 years, from the age of whatever it is, 9, 10, all the way through to now being a senior player. She still plays for me.
I didn't know she played for you.
Yeah, I'll play her assistant manager. And other than a year away from the club, which I know some people won't let her forget that she left for a year, but other than that year, she is Bradford City Women and massive part of what we do. I'm delighted that that opportunity has been presented for me, because when I wasn't at the club beforehand, I knew of her and knew of her skills as well, and it's just worked out really well for me coming into a club to have someone who knows the club, but also someone who's an absolutely outstanding coach, and really gets all the girls on side with her sessions, really pushes the standards, and someone that I can bounce a lot of ideas off.
Sorry, I was going to ask a question, but then you kind of just answered it in that last bit there. I've lost it now. So with Charlotte as your assistant manager, then how much of an effect does she actually have on the players in terms of maybe leadership? Do you feel sometimes if the players maybe can't come to you to discuss a problem they might have, or on the pitch or anything, that they could go to Charlotte?
Yeah, I think it does make a big difference, and I suppose that's the debate around the value of having female staff at a women's club, whether that be manager or assistant. I think it's something that I'd always look to have as a manager and make sure that there was people. Again, whether it's because Charlotte, is also a woman, or the fact that she's playing with them. Either way, it's a different relationship we have with the players compared to myself to her. So it works well, I think. But also, I think a lot's got to be said about our captain, Katie. She's absolutely outstanding at driving the standard with the girls, but likewise being someone that they can go and speak to, and she doesn't hold back sometimes when giving me a call and letting me know what's working well and what's not. So we've got a really nice balance in that, really.
Was Katie the captain of the club before you came in?
No, Katie's another person who'd been around the club for many years, left for a while, and then came back actually just before I joined. No, we made that change midway through sort of me coming in, so probably around the February time, and I'd say we've not looked back. I mean, the previous captain's still at the club and still has a massive role to play, but I think as well, even she recognises that Katie's got a really good skill set for it and is doing a very good job.
Yeah, of course. I'm just wondering generally, are the players all, because I'm being completely honest, I'm not too sure about women's football. I've watched it a few times, but yeah. Are the players all like voluntary, like playing for the club, or are they paid?
Yeah, so they all full-time jobs all come to us. Unfortunately, we're not at a point where we can, throw too much money at them, and sometimes I really wish I could. But yeah, we're just not at that point at the moment. I mean, in our league, there are a number of teams that do pay players, whether that be just regular expenses or some that I know probably give a little bit more than that. But us at the moment, we are sort of fully amateur.
Yeah, so does that make it easier to possibly bring players in on transfers, like if they were to come on, like not necessarily a contract, but just to play for the club?
Yeah, so I suppose it's similar to so your non-league men's as well, as long as you follow the FA guidance of having to put 7 days in on a player. We're currently going through that process ourselves with someone new, someone else, and as long as you follow those guidelines, yes, you can bring someone in. It also makes it difficult because you can lose people. If someone gets in their ear or an ex-manager of theirs gets a new job, there's nothing to guarantee that you keep them there, but other than making sure that you're doing your job and coaching them well and making sure that they like it. So,
do you find perhaps that maybe relationships you've had with players that you maybe managed or coached in the past, you've been able to bring them to the club?
Yeah, something that we've been able to do over the summer. I mean, the difference being obviously I spent quite a lot of time coaching in Sheffield and that area, and the distance between Sheffield and Bradford isn't massive, but at the same time it's big enough, I think, that when you're not paying players, it is their own commitment then, and it's their own petrol and it's their own way of getting there. So it's not been the easiest thing trying to bring in people that I know previously. Likewise, I think, or I'd like to think at least, I've left a good enough impression on a few that, for example, when things haven't gone right for them or they've looked for a new club, I'm one of the first people they've called, and that's worked out wonders for us, but hopefully also for them.
Yeah, and in terms of the actual players having their own jobs and as well as playing for the club, do you sometimes find that might interfere with the actual games?
Not massively with games. A lot of the players have done this now for most of their lives, playing from sort of 7, 8. So they're used to that. And when they get a job, they very much tell work, I'm not available to work Tuesday nights and Thursday nights and Sundays. But occasionally it will impact. Occasionally, you'll have players come to training, tired, they've had really long days, or a lot of my players teach. So I'll get a message saying, next Tuesday is a parents' evening, so I'm definitely not.
Right.
We've got a number of, got a player who works for the fire service. So obviously, depending on her shifts or what's going on at the moment, she can be occasionally unavailable. But they're massively committed to it. Obviously, we're a good level of the women's game, being in the 4th tier. So it's something that they all take really seriously and give themselves as best chance they can to do it.
Yeah, the player who works for the fire station, should have been on call like during a game or during a training session where she had to leave?
No, so not necessarily had to leave us from there, but and I do know that she gets a lot of people to sort of cover her, and there's been moments where she's not been able to stay perhaps for the debrief at the end, and she's had to get her stuff. And obviously they're all concessions you make, and we all appreciate that. So
how often do you train?
We train twice a week, and then play at a weekend.
Do you sometimes find that maybe you wish you could have more chances of training?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, it'd be lovely to be doing this full time and see them, 20 hours a week and everything. But likewise, I think 2's really good. Again, if we're comparing it to maybe non-league men's, because our leagues are a little bit smaller. We only have 12 teams in a league. We very rarely have midweek games. So actually, you'll find that 2 training sessions a week probably works out quite well, and you can get a recovery session in, and then still really work on the stuff that you're doing. I know sometimes in a non-league men's game, you can be playing 3 games a week and just have no time at all to train. So we get quite a nice balance because of that.
And of course the season's been very difficult with coronavirus and national lockdowns. But some more sad news for Bradford is the fact that their chairman, Sally Thackeray, is retiring after 30 years at the club. How are you feeling towards all that?
Yeah, I mean, I've known this since I've joined the club, because I know Sally's tried to leave, I want to say twice before, and then been sort of dragged back. But she's been massively influential in bringing me into the club. Helen, who I mentioned before, has known Sally for many years, so I've known of Sally myself. She's got a massive role to play, not just at Bradford City Women, but in women's football in general. Sally, a lot of what's been achieved at a club level at the very top end of the game has happened with her as part of that. So I think it's a huge loss, obviously, for the club and for women's football in general. But at the same time, it's something that we've known and we've been trying to prepare for. And to be honest with you, it'll be more just getting used to not having that call every week and those sides of it. But we do wish her all the best, obviously, with the decision. So.
How welcoming has she been in the first year to you?
Oh, outstanding. I mean, she's a truly remarkable woman in the way that she's run the club, in the way that she handles people. I know she's got sort of a HR background, so you can see that all the time sort of coming out of her. But for me personally, she's made the first year far easier than it probably should have been. She was a great help to me as well during the lockdown, trying to handle players and also handling when we've had some players leave on good terms, but we've also had some have to leave on not necessarily so good terms. I suppose it's part of management, and particularly in my first role as manager, I can't have sort of asked for someone with any more experience or be any better to sort of be working under, really.
And I believe it's club treasurer Alison Matthews is also leaving.
Yeah, I think it's similar-ish story. Been around forever and just sort of ready for the next bit now for Alison.
How will that actually affect the club? Of course, I don't know if you actually know how it will, but obviously the treasurer, I believe they deal with money and things like that and finances. How is that going to affect the club?
Yeah, so Sally put a bit of a call to arms out the other week. I believe, I don't know too many details of it, unfortunately, to be able to share, but I know that we've had some fantastic response from the fans of Bradford City and other people in the local community. We've already got some really good people in place as well. So I don't think it would be a major impact on us in terms of fearing for those bits, obviously, the people we don't want to lose from everything we're doing. But likewise, it's actually, we've got a really good response from it that might help us grow as well, with some new faces, new ideas coming in. Yeah,
I actually told my brother to apply for that because he works in money. I'm not sure if he ever did, but I believe he did apply for it. So in terms of other sort of volunteers in the club, then just quickly going for all these. Matthew Kermode, I believe that's how you pronounce it. He is a club secretary, but I also know he writes a few articles for the Bradford Telegraph and Argus, I believe it is.
Yeah, I believe Matthew's been again dragged in, as is always the case, dragged in originally to media stuff, and then he's caught the bug, and now he does everything, and he has to deal with the 6 a.m. messages from me and the 11 o'clock messages from Sally, at night, and the whole day stuff. He does an absolutely fantastic job for everyone. So yeah.
Do you read his match reports after a game?
Yeah, I'll always have a bit of a read back because sometimes, thankfully we record our games and everything, but sometimes it's nice to read somebody else's opinion, not just what we've seen as well, see what other people have seen and things from that. So yeah, I do tend to have a look. Yeah.
In terms of the season, then I'm going to be honest. I should have got this up before. I'm unprepared today. In terms of how many games Bradford have actually played, are you? Sorry, obviously you'll know, but how many games are it?
We've played 4 competitive games so far. Only 3 in the league.
Okay, how difficult have you found it sort of coaching the players with everything going on?
Yeah, it's been tough in that we haven't had any consistency. So talking about the league games, we've had 3 really good performances. Started the season with a really tough game at home to Chester-le-Street, who now sit top of the league. I mean, they've now gone and played, I think, 6-7 games, so doing really well. So to lose that one sort of narrowly, only 1-0, we probably should have got something from the game. There's benefit, and there's definitely positives to take from it. And then we ended up having to take a 2-week break because of sort of positive cases at the club, which 3 weeks later we then come back to a game and we're playing against a side that are currently on their 5th game. We're on our 2nd, having had one training session in 3 weeks, and again, it took us 35 minutes to get going. So it's been difficult because you stop-start, you're not getting that momentum. But in all credit to the girls, it's not been difficult because they've been absolutely outstanding. The effort's been second to none, and they've made it a pleasure to do that. We just want to get more games in there.
Do you often find that maybe in terms of the uncertainty in the league with like Chester, who've played a lot more games than you, do you find that it makes it less of an even playing field in that sense?
I wouldn't say less of an even playing field because of that. I think that there's other factors perhaps at our level that make it like that. But I think it can be difficult when you're looking at a league table, and for example, we see ourselves bottom 2, but we've played 4 or 5 games less than a team directly above us. So you've always got to try and take it with a pinch of salt and just keep yourself motivated. So there is that side of it, but at the same time, we just look inwards all the time, and we're getting quite good at that. So yeah, we try not to worry too much about the league table at the moment.
Yeah. In terms of your actual personal life, then I said I'd come back to it. You're also voluntary, aren't you? So not like a full-time contract.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you have another job on the side?
Yeah, I teach full-time as well. Yeah.
In the high school?
College.
Oh, okay, all right. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I never actually knew that. Are you at a college in Bradford then?
No. Again, Barnsley, so Sheffield way, and keeping myself travelling all over. So the travel adds in as well. Yeah.
All right. Myself and Josh would go to one in Huddersfield, but I actually live in Barnsley, which is funny enough. Yeah. So in terms of actually like managing your personal life with the football, how do you find that? Do you find it difficult to get from, say, teaching to get a training session?
No, it's something, again, I've done for years now, and sometimes in roles that have been more demanding, not necessarily in terms of management, obviously, that eats up a lot of time, even away from training, but in terms of nights and things. So, no, I've been fine with that. I mean, I used to do roles where I'd still be living in Manchester and travelling over to Sheffield and doing all that. So you get used to that. I think it's just part and parcel of football, unfortunately, when you try and push yourself in that way. So, yeah, you sort of start to get used to it.
From what I can gather then, football's a big part of your life. So which team do you actually support?
I grew up a Manchester United fan.
Oh, God, that's... right now, that's not a good team to support. What's your thoughts on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer?
I think, again, it is what it is. You look at things a bit differently maybe when, as a manager myself, and I think he's building. I think he's doing something right. Probably not perfect, but I also think that there's many more problems under there that we're not really seeing. So, I'm happy. I'd keep him in what he's doing.
I don't know how much you know about this, because if you've been following it, but what's your thoughts on the media's sort of representations of Marcus Rashford? And did you see the recent story about him buying houses? Yeah,
I think it's fantastic that he's doing things like that. I think at the end of it, it's what we'd all do. It's something that, obviously nowhere near to the scale that he's doing it, but that I'd like to do. Set yourself up to have a life that, and your family have a life that, you've worked really hard for. It's not his fault that he gets paid an absolute fortune every week. That's just the nature of the world that he's in, and he shouldn't be punished for it. I'd be really interested to see how many footballers are actually doing that, and I think it'll be a lot. And yet, it's him that unfortunately gets targeted for it.
Yeah, I was also intrigued whether or not you've ever met Stuart McCall or any Bradford manager whilst you've been in charge.
No, I've
not Bradford manager, but Bradford men's manager. Just realised that.
Yeah, no, not met Stuart directly. I know there was a lot of things sort of planned and a lot of things that we were going to do between the clubs, and I believe they're still in place. But unfortunately, it is what it is. Over sort of December, January, February time, I know that the men's schedule is always relentless anyway, and then obviously we get to February and March and a lockdown happens, so it's held a lot of things back. Our communication with the men's side of the club is growing every day, and getting sort of stronger and stronger. So I fully expect more and more of those sort of things to happen anyway.
Do you have any thoughts on Stuart McCall and Kenny Black's contract extension that's happened tonight?
Yeah, I've interestingly just reading it before I came on. I think it's fantastic. I know a lot of Bradford fans are perhaps a bit worried about where the team currently sit, and I know every part of the club is. Everyone I work with is a Bradford fan, and a lot of the girls who play for us are Bradford fans. So it's a massive part of what we do. But I also think it's nice to get away from that cut and shut culture and start giving someone a space to build. I mean, we all know what happened a few years ago when there was a panic firing and it was of him, and that's then caused many problems since. So yeah, just let him build. He's a very experienced man who knows what he's doing, along with Kenny Black, and fully expect that to be a positive for the club.
Yeah, well, I hope so. Do you have any thoughts towards women's football deserving equal pay? Because that's a bit of a topic which has been going around for a few years with the American football team going for it and things.
I think if we're talking directly about the American football team, I think they 100% should get equal pay. I think any female athlete that competes at an international level, whether that be in football or anything, should be paid equally to the men's, because it's not about revenue. It's not about how many fans come through the gate. It's about representing your country, and that's what it is. Interestingly, obviously, we talk about the US women's national team. They do have bigger turnover and revenue than the men's, so it should be. I think if we were to start to make them calls in the professional game, the club game, then absolutely not. And I don't think you'd find any sort of women's footballer that would actually say that they deserve to be paid at that rate yet. But for the simple reason being, not because of the job that they're doing is any less, but just because the Women's Super League, unfortunately, doesn't have £3 billion worth of TV revenue, so the money's simply not there. But the job that they're doing, I'm delighted to see that more and more is being done to make sure that women's footballers are being able to get full-time contracts, not just at the top league, but it's growing. And I'm also delighted to see that more and more is being done to protect women within the workplace. I know FIFA's just brought in a sort of maternity leave policy, so it's all heading the right direction. And I think, is it happening quick enough? Maybe not, but it is all heading the right direction.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just had to quickly check something. So when you, in terms of saying how we probably deserve it at country level, but perhaps not club level, how do you think that should be handled then, in terms of like when they go off to play for the country, they then get paid the same amount? I don't know how much the US American men's team gets paid in general, but and then when they come back, perhaps get a smaller wage by the club.
Yeah, I mean, I believe what happens, I don't know myself, but I believe most players that are within the pool of players that could be selected, so there might be 30 players, for example, that the country or the FA identify, I believe they all get central contracts. So obviously we're seeing like an influx of American players coming into this WSL at the moment. And I believe that's because certain conditions in their contracts that normally say that they'll get paid less if they're not playing in America will be sort of relaxed. So it's not impacted their ability to go and play abroad. But yeah, I think central contracts is quite a big thing now, particularly in the women's game, because it does follow probably the rugby way of doing things, just because of the comparisons in the more recent terms of professionalism. So I think that's the way it's being done.
Yeah, and another debate going on right now in women's football is Casey Stone, who believes that girls' academy football should be changed from non-elite, which is the men's sort of ranking right now in the government's tier system. What are your thoughts on that in terms of academy football?
Fully agree with her. I mean, I was lucky enough to spend 2.5 years myself at Manchester United's girls' academy. The coaches there are every bit as good as any academy coach I've come across. A licensed coaches, B licensed coaches, absolutely outstanding themselves. The girls commit themselves in the exact same manner that the boys' academies do. The only difference was not as much money was pumped into it, but at the same time, the girls were still turning up 3 times a week, plus a match day at the weekend. We were travelling across the whole north of England, still expected to go on. You've still got a group of players that are being selected by their age group England squads and have now gone on and got professional contracts. So I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be viewed as an elite level, because ultimately they're going to be elite level players earning a living from the game.
Yeah, and in terms of actual how you managed at women's level and coached at men's level, what do you see as sort of the difference between the two? Do you think it's more, I'm not sure how to word this, in terms of the men's game, do you think it's more maybe technical, and the women's game, I'm not too sure. What's the difference between the two?
Probably the opposite of what you've just said. I think the women's game is a lot more technical from the equivalent level. So, I'm not comparing tier 4 of the women's game to tier 4 of the men's. I think you've got to look in terms of actual everything around it. So we're probably comparing ourselves to a non-league level at where we're at. So if you actually compare there, I mean, where I live, there's a club at the bottom of the hill. Been to go and watch them a few times this year, and the pace of the game is a lot more. There's the physicality aspect of it for the men's team, but there isn't the same technical ability. I mean, you watch any team at our level as a coach or even as a fan, you see teams trying to play out from the back. You see mostly really nice pitches being played on and rotating midfielders and some really nice tactical ideas. Something that doesn't tend to happen at the equivalent in the men's. It does tend to still be sort of 4-4-2 and a bit of longer ball, and whoever swears loudest wins and wins that. So women's game definitely a lot more technical in that way. So as a coach, in me, it's an absolute pleasure to be around. In terms of management, I think it's got its ups and downs, without overly generalising. I think sometimes the men's teams do just get on with it, whereas you've got to perhaps use different management tools with some of the female players. But again, that's likely to come from any team, men or women. But just through the experience of the teams that I've directly worked with, they're the skill sets I've had to use differently. I don't think there is an overarching difference between the two. I can only talk about the difference between the teams, really.
Would you ever be open to an opportunity to get back into the men's game, or do you prefer it in the women's game?
I love the women's game. I absolutely love the environment. I've worked very hard to try and build a bit of a reputation for myself in it. And whilst that's really small at the moment, it's something I want to devote time to keep growing. Should the right opportunity come up at the right time in the men's game, it's not like you'd ever say no. But that's not because it's the men's game or it's the women's game. It's just, I love football, I love coaching, I love being around it, and it just depends on the circumstances at the time, I should think.
Yeah, and of course, one difference between the men's game and the women's game is women a lot of the time have to ground share their stadiums, which Bradford women have with Eccleshill. How are you finding that, having to ground share?
I mean, it works really nicely for us. Eccleshill's a lovely little ground. They treat us fantastically well. They give us everything we need and more, and they treat us very well. I know sometimes the women's team are the first to get cancelled if they're worried about a bit of rain and they don't want to risk an important fixture the week after. Eccleshill don't do that. For us, if we've booked the pit or if we've got our games in, they're treated just as important as anything that the men's team do.
Do you perhaps feel that one day maybe you could be seeing the Bradford Women's team playing actual Bradford City Men's Stadium, or do you feel it may not be beneficial?
Probably week in, week out, not beneficial at all. I think something that Bradford themselves should look at is developing facilities for their own team, probably at the training ground, and maybe we could make use of that there. I'd love to see us play on the pitch during my time there, just for a one-off game or even a couple of games. Of course, I'd love to see that, because I think it's an experience that the girls would really enjoy and they'd love themselves. But I'd probably love to see the investment themselves in a facility that the academy can use more regularly. Obviously the under-18s for the men's and us to be able to share that. I'd probably love to see that more than anything. And
I've run out of questions, but I just want to finish this off by asking, would you have any advice to any young women who may perhaps be interested in getting involved in the game?
Just do it. I think that's the best advice I can give anyone. I really was not a great player. I was lucky that I played at a decent-ish standard and well above my level. But I wasn't a great player, and I've sort of made some form of headway in the game just because I've been out there and I've done it. Whether you want to coach, whether you want to referee, whether you want to play, just go and do it, and eventually you'll find your way in it.
What level? Sorry, who did you play for?
No, just local teams. Yeah. Like I said, I stopped playing at sort of 17, 18. I was lucky enough to be in a team with the lads who'd all dropped out of the academies, but it was still just a local level then. So, yeah.
What position?
Where they put me, tended to be left back or centre forward if they needed someone to do a bit of running, but no, it tended to stick me at left back. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's going to bring this week's episode of the Benchwarmers Podcast to a close. I'd like to thank my guest for today, Chris HAMES.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been great to learn more about women's football and about Bradford mainly. And hopefully you all enjoyed. Like, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next week.